4:20 in 3 minutes.
Oh, it's all yours, Mark. Good timing, Mark. Mark,
Take a deep breath.
Congratulations, Mark.
Intimidating microphone.
Silence, please.
I thought I was going to say something political, but it kind of reminds me of that scene from It's a Wonderful Life where it says you're a rich man if you've got friends. And I'm glad to see I've got friends. It's really touching, actually.
We love you, Mark.
All over.
We love you, Mark.
How was the last 5 years?
I guess it has a redemptive quality. I feel good. I feel good now. I did good things with my time. You know, I learned to become a bassist in a rock and roll band. And I do not look very rock and roll, you know, so it's nice to, yeah, there you go. And I read an extensive amount, and I kept my mind agile, and like I've always pointed out, it's every inmate, all the inmates were kind to me. I never heard an unkind word said to me in 4.5 years. Which I can't say out in the free world. In the free world, people abuse you all like crazy on social media and all that. In prison, people are very polite in prison, so I'll say that. And, you know, I will say that American law is very pernicious and harsh and cruel. Many of my fellow inmates got life without parole for a drug offense, which was just outlandish. And in fact, 1 in 8 of them get life without parole for a drug offense. I knew many of them. I helped many of them do their clemency paperwork, seeking a commutation of their sentence. And I was stunned at how draconian the laws in the United States are.
Now that you're out, do you recognize the pot landscape? It's drastically different, right?
Well, now, funny that you should say that. I know nothing of the pot landscape in Canada, other than that the political events have shown that we've got legal pot in Colorado and Washington. We're about to have it in Washington, D.C., Alaska, and Oregon.
Yeah, excellent.
But
thank you, Mark.
And there is progress, but I will say this, you know, the last time I was in Windsor was when pot was legal very briefly in 2003, and I think the Windsor police station must be nearby, and 300 people and I smoked a big, huge 1 ounce, 12-inch joint. And I was able to demonstrate back then, 11 years ago, that pot was legal in Windsor, and we did the same thing throughout Ontario where it was legal. And it was legal. The courts had declared it legal. But then we were betrayed, and the very same court that said it was legal turned against us and said it was a prohibition again. And there you go. Well, don't let me interrupt your celebration. But I'll tell you, it does smell like a party. It does smell like a party.
Canada! Yeah!
Well, I will say I fought long and hard for that. And,
Thank you.
it is, and it always has been my destiny to overgrow this Canadian government, worldwide governments, and get rid of this pernicious prohibition that we've had for all these 45 years in Canada. We've had people being arrested by the thousands every year. That's a long time for an injustice to go on in a democratic country. It's almost implausible or impossible to conceive that 2 million Canadians in the last 45 years have been arrested for marijuana possession largely, but production, sale, you name it, and the occasional person for selling seeds. And, you know, and we've been lied to by every political entity and institution of this democratic country. You know, we were promised by Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau in August 1970 that marijuana would be decriminalized. And then we were promised by Joe Clark in 1979 that marijuana would be decriminalized. And then Jean Chrétien said it would be a fine back in 2002. And then the Senate committee, special committee, nine senators all unanimously said in 2002 marijuana should be legalized. And Jack Layton, the NDP leader, or was seeking to be the NDP leader in 2003, came to my home and said we ought to legalize marijuana. And so on it goes. You know, even the leader of the government now in this pernicious conservative government under the tyrant Stephen Harper, the head of the Senate is for the government is Pierre Nolan. who in 2002 chaired the report that said marijuana should be legalized, and to this day he has done nothing in the Senate to champion that since 2002. So we have always heard promises for 45 years from the NDP, from the Liberals, from even conservatives like Pierre Claude Nolan, head of the Senate, wrote that report, great report, saying that marijuana should be legalized in 2002, and yet we still have people, 50, 60,000 being arrested every year in Canada. And we still have black market gangs that to some degree control the trade. And we still have people paying way too much for marijuana. And we still have cities... Oh, absolutely we're paying way too much. And let me tell you, so help me God, we are going to bury this prohibition next year in this federal election coming up. And you, I hope, will join me in getting every single Canadian you know to get out and vote next year. We are going to go all in and put our faith in the Liberal Party of Canada in the next election, because I do believe they are sincere that they will legalize marijuana, and I want to remind everybody that legalize means no one ever goes to jail for marijuana. Now, I have been arrested 28 times for marijuana civil disobedience. I have been jailed 23 times. The most recent 5-year sentence is just the latest. And it may not even be the last if I have to continue to prove my point.
People took from police. What about that, sir?
By the way, I've also even been arrested in 7 out of 10 provinces from that civil disobedience. I will say this, I tried many times in Ontario, but I have not been arrested for marijuana in Ontario, Quebec, and Prince Edward Island. And I've been arrested in all the other provinces for marijuana civil disobedience. And I will say this, I tried in 1992, February, in front of the London Police Department of my hometown, when books and magazines about marijuana were all made illegal in 1987 by the Mulroney government. Another one of the many betrayals of the people when they actually make books and magazines about marijuana illegal. Well, that went on for some years, and I tried to get arrested to break that law to show that it was unconstitutional. And ultimately, we did show it was unconstitutional. But I tried to get arrested here in Windsor, smoking in front of the police department in London, Ontario, Sudbury, Toronto, Ottawa, Peterborough, Kingston, Hamilton, that's right. Chris Goodwin knows about that. He helped organize that one. North Bay, Thunder Bay. All those cities where we smoked out during the summer of legalization in 2003. It's been a long road to get to the point where next year we can say we can make marijuana legal, that we can finally do it. And I know, I know it's a nice party vibe. Every day there's a 420 and every day there's an opportunity for celebration. But people, we have to get serious about politics. We can't continue to think that it's a game or a joke. We absolutely have to get our family, our friends to get out and register to vote. And we have to get out and vote. And I know it's the most uncool thing in the world to have to say, especially to young people, that voting is the answer, but it is. It absolutely is. Next year we've got to go to the polls. We've got to vote this Conservative government. Stephen Harper is a despot. He is a tyrant. He is a bad man running a party whose principles do not parallel that of, I believe, most Canadians who want transparency, justice, honesty. We've had 45 years of billions and billions of dollars of wasted money for a public policy that has never benefited the public in any single way. There's absolutely nothing after 45 years that people can say prohibition has brought a benefit to Canadians. And Stephen Harper, more than any other politician in the past 40 years, believes in this prohibition. He wants to punish us. He wants to portray marijuana use as a sin that requires harsh punishment. And we have to reject that. We have to go to the polls next year, and we have to reject that. With that having been said, I want to change my message and just tell you that I'm very grateful to be home. Windsor's home. All of Canada's home. And it's wonderful to have friends. I really want to thank Dana Larson, who's actually turned out to be an incredible Canadian activist, perhaps one of the most outstanding activists of our time. Has Sensible BC raised 220,000 signatures last year to try and get a referendum in British Columbia to decriminalize marijuana. A protege of mine, my editor of my magazine Cannabis Culture for 10 years. By the way, that's one of the real tragedies of my going to jail. You know, I can get through that. I adapted to that. I'm home. Everything's fine now, but because I had to go to jail, I had to stop publishing my magazine, and I love that magazine. 15 years we published Cannabis Culture, and the only reason we closed it down is because I was going to jail, and I couldn't afford to have someone replace me to keep that thing going. And the other tragedy, I think, me personally, not for anyone else, is that I can never visit the United States again. And that really disturbs me, because when I was in prison, I got over 7,500 letters of support from people. And 6,500 of those letters were from American people.
Yes, they were.
Good people. I got letters from every state, every place, and man, the oppression in some parts of the United States is still so great. In places like Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia and rural America. It's funny, I didn't get many letters from, say, like Denver or San Francisco or New York or places where, you know, people are sophisticated, marijuana is easy to obtain, but I sure did hear from small town America and the small places in the world where they are oppressed and they don't have the rights that we take for granted in Vancouver to light up a joint any old time or to go to one of 35 dispensaries. And heck, I could say that in rural Canada they don't have that kind of privilege, that there's still a lot of oppression. I mean, I ought to know. I went to jail for 3 months for passing one joint in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, as recently as 2004.
When was the last time you smoked?
Yeah.
On May 9th, 2010, the day before I got...
When's the next one?
If I just hang around this crowd by the smell of it, I'll Well, I'll tell you what.
Somebody have one for you?
I did want to finally thank a few other people, and then I'll take questions from anybody. I've got nothing else planned. I would like to thank Dana Larson an awful lot. He sent me, must be over 500 books in my time in prison. I mean, he was just amazing. And there was a fellow who's from Michigan. I want to publicly thank him. His name is Len Preslesnik. He's from a place called Holland, Michigan. I know all about Holland, Michigan. A lot more than anybody ought to know about Holland, Michigan. It's a nice place, actually, in western Michigan. And the reason I know a lot about it is because Len sent me a letter every day for 4.5 years. I mean, he couldn't really afford it. If I told him how much postage he spent in 4.5 years, it came to $1,000 just in postage to send me letters. But he'd send me a letter, and then clippings and cartoons and crosswords and photocopies of articles from his local paper about what was going on in Holland, and all the different things that occurred to him as being interesting to him were actually very interesting to me. But I couldn't believe the dedication. I received a letter from the time I was incarcerated 4.5 years ago to the last day I left Yazoo Federal Prison. Len was sending me letters every day faithfully. And I only wrote him back like once every 3 or 4 months, so it wasn't like he was getting a lot of feedback from me. But there were dedicated Americans like that sending me letters, and I received letters from people all the time, once a week, once a month, you know, and I'm talking about 6,500 different people, not even the same people. And I can only write back. I wrote about 2,000 letters in my time there. I didn't get back to everybody. I feel bad about those I didn't get back to, because I think they really did want to reply. And I want to thank, most of all, and by the way, a lot of people gave me money to help me get through it. You know, it's expensive in prison. Now, people think, what could you buy? Listen, you've got to buy a lot of stuff in prison. You have to buy everything. Like, even my email was $3 an hour. It cost me $350 a month for my email. Phoning Jody just for 10 minutes a day, which is the maximum limit you get, cost $135 a month. My food budgets were like, I would spend $500 on black market onions and green peppers. A green pepper would cost $5. $5 for green. I don't even know what the real world price is for food anymore. All I know is that, you know, if I see an onion, I'm going to go, it's $5. You know, green bell pepper, $5. Tomatoes are $3 in prison. So, you know, a number of people donated money to me, and that was really super generous of them. And but most of all, of course, I want to thank my wife, Jody Emery, and she came coming to see me 164 days out of the last 4.5 years. 164 days is actually 5 months. And not only that, these were quality visits. We'd sit together for 6 hours a day, and I would mostly listen. I didn't have much to say in prison. You know, prison is a pretty routine thing. If you've heard me say one, you know, but Jody would tend to talk about 80% of the time, and I would delightedly listen on it, hang on every word she said. And that's 81 visits to places as far away as near Jacksonville, Florida, Folkston, Georgia was, and Yazoo City, and totaled 164 days. I kept track on a calendar, all the different visits. I remembered everything and kept records of a lot of things. And 164 visits she came, and it cost us about $110,000, all that travel. Now, I will say this, Americans and Canadians contributed money to help pay for that. But my wife really, really did the extraordinary in earning a living, paying for all that, paying for me, getting me through it, coming to visit me, being totally, utterly committed to me. I'm the luckiest man alive. You smell good.
And you can touch me like this.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would get reprimanded for this sort of stuff.
You got in trouble for holding hands at times.
Emery, touching?
Yeah. Anyway, if there's any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
How was the order? How was the transfer coming here?
Well, oddly enough, an intelligence agent wanted to talk to me and expressed that not everybody in government agencies happens to agree with the marijuana prohibition. And I said, okay, that's good if you feel the need to tell me that. And she said, you know, basically she's trying to convince me we're not all bad people. And I said, really? I was never under that impression you were all bad people. And but you know what's funny? In that customs office, their washrooms are just like prison washrooms. I said, can I use a washroom? They said, yeah. And I go and I go, oh my God, it's a prison washroom, right? And I said, wow, that's kind of a trippy thing to see in my first spot in Windsor, Canada. But anyway, it was fine. There's nothing they can do. They couldn't. It was unnecessary to strip search me because I've been strip searched probably 3 times today already. So I presume they assumed I had no contraband on me.
Election coming up next fall. What are you going to be doing until that election?
Oh, okay. Well, we'll be doing lots of things. First of all, I may not even get to most cities in Canada until that tour. That tour is from September 10th next year to October 17th, the day before the federal election. We'll be going to 30 Canadian cities. And the idea being is that, you know, people diminish our impact as voters, the cannabis culture. But the cannabis culture is about 3 to 4 million Canadians, and we are potentially the largest voting bloc in Canada. There are not 3 to 4 million Roman Catholics. There are not 3 to 4 million Protestants. There are not even 3 to 4 million conservatives. There just aren't 3 to 4 million of anybody when you consider of a voting bloc, right? So I think we are a marginalized, underrepresented, and underestimated voting bloc, and we can really make a big difference. If in fact, you know, I've heard critics disparage, oh, only 4 or 5% of Canadians think marijuana is the #1 issue. Well, 5% of a riding, if I can get 5% of a riding that come and vote for the Liberal Party of Canada, we can influence 50 to 100 ridings. And that's a majority government as far as I'm concerned. So we have it in our power to make sure the Liberals get a majority government in the next election. So I'll be going to universities. I have a university tour planned in January and February, and they're being booked up right now. And we have the election tour next September, October. We're going to Spain and in September, and we'll be talking to government ministers. I'll be meeting the man in Portugal who's in charge of their decriminalization. And when I go to Ireland, I'll be meeting members of Parliament in both Belfast and Dublin and talking about what's going on there. And then I'm speaking in Prague and Vienna the next month, and so on. And I hope this will continue around the world, so that I'm speaking in Jamaica, South Africa, and Uruguay early next year as well. And then whenever we make those appearances, we're going to be giving the same message, and it's a worldwide message. Nothing good comes of marijuana prohibition. I want to remind every politician everywhere in the world, nothing good comes of, if you don't want young people to smoke marijuana, that's one thing. But to give them a criminal record, to stigmatize them with a criminal record, to put them in jail even for one night, and believe me, there's no grottier place on earth than the Vancouver overnight lockup. And I've seen it many times, and to me that is a very traumatizing thing. And we shouldn't be putting young people in jail anywhere, let alone 3 months I got for passing one joint in Saskatoon. So such grotesque injustices happen in Canada. They don't just happen to me. They happen to all people who might be in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong police officer. And so we've got a lot ahead of us because Canadians are cynical about voting generally. Young people particularly don't vote. And it's true that in the past in the cannabis culture, our people don't vote. So I've got a job ahead of myself, but if we can get this Liberal majority government in next year, we'll never need to go to the polls to make marijuana legal ever again. And so, that's a promise. I'd like to tell the people of Canada, you won't actually hear from me anymore in 18 months. All those generations of Canadians that can't stand hearing Marc Emery, is he still alive? Did they finally, oh my God, he's back and he's going to harass and cajole everybody? Yes, but only until we make marijuana legalized, and then you're free. Then you're free. There's no more of me. Mission accomplished. I can be happy then, and we can all be one just country with legal marijuana, and this issue will never come up again. Because I hear critics say, well, Canadians are interested in far more important things. I said, what? What are you interested in? The economy, the environment, health care? You can't do anything about that by voting. No vote's going to change that. Canadian governance isn't like that. The NDP, the Liberals, and the Conservatives essentially have the same policy with different personalities. On one hand, we have the tyrant Stephen Harper. Then we have the likable, amiable, young urbanite in Justin Trudeau. And then we have another Stephen Harper clone authoritarian in Thomas Mulcair. Okay, but essentially their policies are just a nuance of difference, hardly insignificant. This is the only issue in the next election that can have a profound impact. There are 2 million Canadians who've been arrested for marijuana, and I dare say close to 1 million Canadians have criminal records. We should expunge that immediately. That's part of legalization. Part of legalization is that everybody who is ever convicted has that record expunged. And for that matter, once we get beyond the legalization part, we're owed an apology. We're owed an apology from Canadians for putting up with 45 years of a completely unjust, pernicious intolerance. No other group in Canada has had to endure what we've had to endure. There's no other Canadian group that's had 2 million of their kind arrested over a 45-year period, and hundreds of thousands of people went to jail for a peaceful lifestyle choice like choosing marijuana. That's insane. That's the kind of thing from the dark ages, and it still exists, and we're owed an apology from every politician that ever participated in that, from Pierre Elliott Trudeau right to the present day in Stephen Harper. And I'm also the cowardice of our legislature. In the United States right now, there were 235 Congress people voted successfully to tell the Justice Department to lay off the medical marijuana states. And you've got dozens of politicians in Congress in the United States proposing legalization bills. In every state legislature throughout the United States, there's a politician trying to get legalization in a state. But in Canada, we see nothing. The legislatures, all of them, are completely silent. There's not a single MLA from any of the legislatures talking about legalization. And in fact, none of the MPs themselves ever talk about it. And they say America's a much more religious society than we are, but Canadian politicians are the most gutless group of people I've ever seen. They don't want to bring up marijuana. They're afraid of it. After 45 years, really? They're still afraid of it? Is this what we've got? We elect mice, not men and women? Is that really the case? Because, I'll give you an example, too. The politicians are whipped by their leaders to a deplorable degree. One of the most admirable members of Parliament is somebody who is from Vancouver East right now, Libby Davies. She's been the member of Parliament there for 17 years. But you know what? Libby Davis can't even tell you now that she supports legalization policy. She can't tell you that she wholeheartedly endorses any measures to legalize marijuana because Thomas Mulcair, her leader, has her whipped into never saying that word because it dovetails into the Liberal Party policy. In other words, Libby Davis has been a member of Parliament for 17 years, and even she doesn't even have the power to say what she really believes. She can't even use the L word. She can't say legalization without getting ostracized by her own party leader. This is a woman who's been in Parliament for 17 years and has been the deputy leader of the NDP, and she can't even tell the truth. What is the good of electing people if they can't even tell what they really believe? And you'll never find a country with as many gutless politicians as you will in Canada. Absolute cowards. I mean, it's unfortunate that Pierre Elliott Trudeau and Stephen Harper agree on so many things, and they both consider MPs nobodies. But if you're going to let yourself be cowed and intimidated by this party line, then you are in fact nobodies. And Canadians have been electing a lot of nobodies for a long time. They don't stand for anything. They won't stand up for anything. They won't stand up to their leader over policy. They won't stand up for Canadians, and they won't stand up for principle. You know, and so we're going to have to reclaim our democracy and get at least marijuana legalized next election, and then maybe after that we should go and do what Stephen Harper originally said he would do, attack the democratic deficit. How did we end up with so many cowardly, gutless politicians in this country who stay silent on the key issues of the day? That is a big question, because I'll say this, maybe the United States is messed up in a lot of ways, but there are hundreds of politicians, elected officials at the state level and the federal level who are talking about legalizing marijuana, and you're just not hearing it in Canada, and there's something wrong with that. There's something very wrong with that.
Your wife has spoken in support of Justin Trudeau, and she's actually been asked to run for the Liberal Party in Vancouver East. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, she'd make a most wonderful representative of the people. She's very compassionate about the ordinary person. She's very in tune with the sufferings and ailments that afflict ordinary Canadians.
Do you support Justin Trudeau?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Absolutely, absolutely no wavering there. You know, I don't have to agree with him on everything. I don't even have to like Justin Trudeau. I will say this: I deplore and loathe Stephen Harper. I think he's an evil man. I think Stephen Harper is a Machiavellian manipulator, and there's a book out that says, when I'm through with this country, you won't recognize it. That's Stephen Harper's agenda, to remake Canada in his puritanical Machiavellian image of what he thinks Canada ought to be. But Stephen Harper's a very, very weird and unusual man. He's the only person on the planet I can think of that has no friends. You know, and none. And there's a reason for that. He's a cold, icy character. I'm not even convinced he's human sometimes, but I realize he is. But there's something very wrong about Stephen Harper, and there's something very inappropriate that a man like that is our Prime Minister. So I will say, by contrast, Justin Trudeau will be a wonderful change. At least Justin Trudeau will listen. Stephen Harper doesn't listen to anybody else. And Justin Trudeau will listen. And Justin Trudeau came from, despite the fact that his father was a prime minister and he grew up with wealth, I will say that Justin Trudeau is a much more humble person, and a much more grounded person, and a much more connected to reality person. And I have a lot more confidence in him than I have in any other Canadian politician. And I believe he will follow through and make marijuana legal in Canada, because it's the right thing to do for one. It has the majority of Canadians supporting it for another. And it's going to make history. And I think every Prime Minister wants to have a legacy. And I think the impact of making marijuana legal will have historical implications far beyond what any of us can see right now. Because it's going to be a lot like being Martin Luther King. Who doesn't want to be Martin Luther King? Justin Trudeau, if he makes marijuana legal, will end 45 years of a vicious prohibition that's been a civil rights violation in our whole time. It's not about getting high. It's about solving a major injustice that's plagued this country for half a century. And if he does that, he will be forever remembered fondly by Canadians for the rest of eternity.
You say it's your destiny to bring about the end of
prohibition. Absolutely. Now, not just me. It's always been my destiny to be an instrument that brings about the overthrow of the government and the end of prohibition, and I've taken that very seriously for the last 25 years. I mean, that's why I break the law deliberately, transparently, in full view of people and get arrested, because I believe that historically that's always worked. You know, when I was in prison, but long before that, I read all the great works about Malcolm X and about Martin Luther King and about Rosa Parks and about the Civil Rights Movement and about people historically who've had to put their life on the line for principle, and principle works. If you show people enough that principle is important and that you're willing to give almost all of your life for it, and whatever manner that takes, people will pay attention. And I believe Canadians are sensitive people, and you can get through to them. And so, for me, I've always felt it's my destiny. For 35 years, my destiny to this one thing. And that's why when we make marijuana legal in Canada and the rest of the world, then, you know, my destiny is complete. I'll feel my life is greatly satisfied and contented then.
Are you going to start selling seeds again?
I actually, you know, I never wanted to even sell seeds. I sold seeds to raise millions of dollars to give away, which fortunately is well documented. The DEA has, down to the penny, all the money I gave those American legalization groups, including groups. I gave money to the 1998 Washington, D.C. medical marijuana ballot signature gathering, which is now law, and now Washington, D.C. is going further, and they're going to have legalization put on the ballot. You know, the money I raised for selling those seeds paid get signatures for the Colorado Medical Marijuana Initiative in 2000, and Alaska, and Arizona, and class action suits against the federal government, and dozens of other major projects around the world. That was my motivation for selling seeds. I've been a bookseller all my life. I'm not a botanist. I'm not a seed person. I sold seeds to raise a lot of money, which we did, and I gave that money away, which we came to good event. So, do I have the same impetus to sell seeds? No. But do I have a motivation to get fully integrated into the modern marijuana industry? Yes, I do. I'd like to have a marijuana store. I'd like to sell seeds again. I'd like to have a marijuana pain relief center selling salves and lotions and CBD medicines. I'd like to be on the forefront. But, you know, that may not be my opportunity. Maybe we just have to be content with what I've got and get this legalization thing done, and then years from now we can see what opportunities present themselves. Maybe I shouldn't rush in. I mean, I have no particular qualms about going to jail again if it's for a good cause, right? That's the only way anybody should ever go to jail, is for a good cause. Otherwise, you know, don't break the law, you idiot, you know.
Now that you're out, what kind of a meal do you want? What are you missing? What kind of meal?
You know, the biggest problem in prison is institutional food is all starches, fats, sugars, and meats. What you don't get is fresh vegetables. You just don't find fresh vegetables. You don't find fresh fruits. So the list of fruits I ate are pretty limited. I could get a banana and an apple for the most part. And they banned grapefruits and oranges a year ago because people make hooch out of them now. In my experience in prison, I never tasted this stuff, but people make hooch out of anything. I mean, they make it out of ketchup. They make it out of, I mean, it's scary what they make alcohol out of, right? And a lot of people don't drink that sort of stuff, but, you know, you get bored in prison, so a lot of people are motivated. See, I was always very busy. I had my New York Times Sunday crosswords books. I had books. I had 25 magazine subscriptions. By the way, thank goodness for Maclean's magazine, which is a great magazine. I love that magazine. It's a Canadian magazine. And you know what? My American inmate said, "Mark, this magazine is really good. You don't read about this kind of perspective here in America." And I said, "No, you don't. Maclean's magazine is better than any equivalent American news magazine of its kind." I did not do that.
Mark, question.
So,
Yeah, can I take you and Jody and your party to the best organic Italian trattoria in Windsor? It's only a few blocks away. I got an account.
Well, that's a generous offer, and I thank you for it, but I probably won't do that. I'm going to hang out here for a while, though.
Would Jody like to say anything with you?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Would you like some water?
by the way, you have gotten really slick at speaking. Every now I'll call up and Jody will play. Here's my latest interview, and I'll go, "Man, you are good. You are on message." You know?
I only played our paired interview. You heard when we were on Roy Green. You heard me speak, and so you haven't seen me on stage yet. I got to impress you soon.
Yeah. All right.
We talk long term.
Yeah. I'm worried about how it's going to go. I'm not necessarily sure I've ever shared the stage before, so that's going to be interesting. Yeah, and that's an interesting development, because when Jody was my acolyte younger, she was always listening to me and learning from me. And for the last 5 years before, when I knew I would be extradited from 2005 onward, I was non-stop training Jody about how to run a business, how to do everything, how to give speeches, how to do all that. And now she's gotten really good at all that, and she's become my equal. And I can't say she was my equal before, because she was my acolyte and I was her mentor, and now we're equal. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work out too. You know.
Campaign manager, maybe?
No, I'm actually going to be campaigning for her. Like, I do know how to campaign. I'm looking forward to campaigning in Vancouver East and getting the signatures for her nomination and signing up members to the Liberal Party. I can do all that. That's good. And she's really good at meeting the people and staying on message and doing all that. I mean, I actually understand why Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party Brain Trust would be nervous about me. I make everybody nervous. You know, I mean, lately I've noticed that the Conservatives and the NDP are offering advice to the Liberals. Oh, I don't think the Liberals should have anything to do with Marc Emery because he's a loose cannon. And I'm thinking, I have never seen the Conservatives and NDP giving the Liberals advice ever before on anything else. But on me, everybody has an opinion about who should be involved with me. So Jody's a terrific person in that when you go through all her interviews, written and recorded, I don't think she's ever said an off note. I don't think she's ever said a misstatement that anybody would be embarrassed about. Now, whereas that's not true with me. I am a fellow that likes to have a little bit of fun. I'm a more worldly person. I'm 56 years of age. I've said some outrageous things in my time, and for the most part, I will stand by those outrageous things, so I'm kind of unqualified to be a candidate. But Jody, on the other hand, never says an unsound note, and I think she's going to be terrific if she gets that nomination. I sure hope she does. I will be campaigning really hard for that, and I'd love to be the husband of a member of Parliament in Ottawa. I really would.
All right, Mark, no politics. Let's do it. Yeah!
That's nice. 2005, so I've never had a phone in 9 years, so I have no idea how to text. I don't even know what an app is. And she said, Mark, you won't recognize the world anymore because people don't make eye contact anymore because they're never looking up on the street. They're all looking at their screens. And I thought, well, that's kind of sad because, you know, I'm a real retail person. I love meeting people, and I believe in making eye contact and establishing a human connection. This whole idea that our brains are slowly being rerouted through technology. I sound like an old person. I do. Okay, well, do you want to say something?
Wait. Short term, what happens in the next 48 hours?
Next 48 hours, a whole lot of... See, that's those outrageous things that I feel compelled to say that if I were a candidate, I would never say that because candidates don't have sex. They don't. That's what I've noticed in Canada.
Not true.
All elected officials are sexless, opinionless. They have no personality or charisma of any kind whatsoever. Right.
So you stay
Except Rob Ford.
You stay in Windsor overnight. You're heading to Toronto tomorrow. Is that right?
That's right. Yes. And
what are you going to do here in Windsor?
well, first of all, the first thing I'm going to do is go buy some. Get a real razor. Yeah, I've got to get some clothing. I own nothing, so a razor.
Mark, I got a gift here for you.
Oh, okay.
This is from the Hamilton Cannabis Club and the Cannabis Clubs all around the world.
And I thought prisoners had ingenuity. Well, oh my goodness! Well, thanks very much. That's good job on that.
When are you going to get home?
Well, we get home on Sunday at 9 a.m. and then hopefully it's a sunny day because I'm just going to hang out in Victory Square. We used to call it Hemp for Victory Square back when I first moved to Vancouver 20 years ago, and hang out and just meet all my fellow Vancouverites. And then on Monday morning I go to work, which is great because I really do have to get back to work and earn a living and start making up for the 4.5 years of being a liability, essentially. So going to work on next Monday, and I see my family. Well, I'm from Ontario, and my sister in Newmarket and her children. my brother in London, Ontario, and I'm going to buy clothes and get new glasses. These glasses, I'll give Hugo Boss credit. These things have lasted 12 years, but they are beat up and battered. And I haven't had any dental exam in 5 years, and I haven't had a physical in 5 years, so I should probably get that. Although, you know, it's funny, when I was in the prison, the doctor said, Mark, you're 56 years old and you're not on any medication. She said, you know, the average 56-year-old is on 4 or 5 medications. And I thought, wow, maybe somehow prison was redemptive in that way, because I feel fine. You know, I'm in good health as far as I know. You always have to say that to every time you say you're in good health, as far as I know, because you're in good health until you're not. But otherwise, it's just buying stuff. I got to get a laptop, an iPhone, a couple of suits, lots of clothes. Yeah, I'm gonna get a Galaxy. I don't like iPhones because Jody has an iPhone, and half the time I thought the reception was lousy. So I don't trust. iPhones do a lot of things, but they're just not a good phone. And I'm not gonna really get into the texting thing so much. I like calling people. I like hearing the nuance in people's voices. You can determine a lot from the way people say. In fact, I remember our employees used to have problems with texting because they always read into the text the kind of emotion that the person was saying, whereas in the voice you can get the real feeling of people. So I'm getting a Samsung Galaxy.
Is there a desire at all to relax, or do you just want to get right to it?
Oh no, I relaxed 4.5 years in prison. There's none of that. No, I did. Reading is relaxing. Reading newspapers, the New York Times every day is relaxing. Books are relaxing. Crosswords are relaxing. Boredom is relaxing. And so no, I don't need to go on holiday, although we're going to Spain anyway, and Ireland, so even on a speaking tour, you know, I mean, it's still a new country. And Jody and I have never traveled anywhere together. The reason for that was because I thought the DEA would pick me up anywhere in the world if I left Canada, so I haven't left Canada for nearly 20 years. And so we're looking forward to traveling around the world and giving speeches and talking and meeting people, but also seeing northern Spain and Ireland, and these are all lovely places to go to. I feel privileged to be able to go to Vienna and Ireland and Spain and Prague and all these wonderful places in the world, as well as Canada. I love Canada, and I'm looking forward to, you know, I have great sentimental feelings towards Canada. I got some of my best audiences in Windsor. We got 300 people in 2004 to smoke out the police station. And, you know, Windsor's going to be offended if I call it a backwater, but you know, the more, shall we say, less glamorous places in Canada tend to have the best and most enthusiastic members of the cannabis culture. I got 300 people in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. I got 300 people come and see me in Thunder Bay. You go to Toronto, you get like 50 to 100 people because they're all jaded, right? They got lots of weed. What's the problem? You know, Vancouver, same thing type of thing. But in the small towns throughout Canada, like St. John's, Newfoundland, I got 300 people that come out there. And those kind of places, you know, people come out and support you because they don't get a lot of support there, and they reciprocate. And I kind of like that about Canada. You know, Canada. What is that? Oh, I shouldn't even say that. Canada's been belly good to me. What is that old Saturday Night Live thing? Canada's been really good to me. And, you know, the politicians and its institutions, the courts haven't always been great. By the way, I wanted to remind people that in 2003, when the Supreme Court ruled against us in a 6-3 vote that marijuana prohibition was constitutional. By the way, the 3 people who said marijuana prohibition was unconstitutional were all the 3 Francophone judges. So remember that if you ever have any anti-Quebec feelings. The 3 Quebec judges fully supported legalization, and the 6 Anglophone bastards did not support legalization. The 6 Anglophone members of the Supreme Court said that marijuana prohibition was not only constitutional, but Canadians had no more a right to possess marijuana and consume marijuana than they did to practice cannibalism. Only in the Supreme Court of Canada actually compared marijuana consumption to cannibalism and said we have no more right to consume marijuana than we do to practice cannibalism. So remember, these are the kind of people that are being appointed to our courts who would not only think such a thing, but would actually put it in print and make that as part of their official majority decision, right? So that's why it's up to the people to reclaim this issue, because we cannot rely on the courts to do it, and we certainly have never been able to rely on the politicians, so we've got to make our numbers heard, and that means those 3 or 4 million in our culture have to show up to vote, and believe me, when we do that and we change history, no one will ever underestimate us or take us for granted again.
There you go.
All right. Any other questions?
Anything
What airports you
apprehensive
fly on?
about, either politically, personally, as you start this?
After 5 years in prison, you can't scare me. I'm apprehensive about nothing.
Sir, what
No.
airport did they fly you into in America? Did they fly you into Metro or Detroit
Oh,
City?
no, I came into Toledo.
Toledo?
Well, see, the only reason there are flights bringing me even up here is because America has so many illegals that the flights went to Minneapolis to pick up about 50 Hispanics, and then Toledo to pick up another 50, and then they dropped off 3 Canadians on route. It's only an accident I even got here on that flight.
I'd just like to say that I used to work with Uncle Sam for almost 12 years.
Yeah.
Right there, used to be the guy to take away a bottle of water at the airport. But yeah, but people like you, Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live's a great thing, yeah.
Yeah, and Barry Cooper convinced me to anytime I saw weed and songs back.
And Barry Cooper's a big supporter of mine. He's one of the happiest people I'm out.
Yeah, I was pretty much like that. I said, risk my career, maybe even jail time, just not letting people feel with the weed, because where I just always told myself was, I'm here to stop the bomb, not the bomb. Stop the bad hippie. I mean, the terrorists, not the hippies and stuff like that. And so, like I said, I figured that then I always wanted to come up here and shake your hand, and I kind of flooded my new car on the drive up here from yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's flooded. Detroit's entirely washed out.
I came in all the way from Northern Virginia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And say hi to the Okay, well, listen, I'll do any private interviews anyone's going to
First come, first serve.
Jeremiah. Yes.
What?
Is it recording? Yeah, well, there was a mic stand up there, that's what I was...
Jail 20 and I will say this.